Welcome to Grace to Endure. In this video, we're going to be looking at one more Old Testament passage of God marking people, and then we're going to head over to the New Testament. We want to see what this whole idea that God has in mind, who he marks, why he marks them, and what those marks mean, so that if and when the Antichrist does it in our lifetime, we will be able to recognize if perhaps he is using this idea and concept of marking people to show himself to be God and to do godlike things, since we see such a multitude of times when God himself marks people. And so, since it just seems to make sense that the Antichrist might be copying what God does, since he's trying to prove to the entire world that he is indeed God. Okay, so first let's just read Exodus 28:36 through 38. You are to make a pure gold medallion and engrave it like the engraving of a seal, holy to the Lord. Fasten it to a cord of blue yarn so that it can be placed on the turban. The medallion is to be on the front of the turban. It will be on Aaron's forehead, so that Aaron may bear the guilt connected with the holy offerings that the Israelites consecrate as all their holy gifts. It is always to be on his forehead, so that they may find acceptance with the Lord. So, what does it mean to be sealed as holy to the Lord? Let's just stop and think about what this means. So, to have a seal, it is like a signature or a ring, a signet ring sometimes, and we know that kings wear these on their fingers oftentimes, and they would put their seal on an envelope or a scroll, and if it has the king's seal on it, you are not supposed to open it unless it's intended for you. And the idea is that you know that it has now come from the king. This note or this scroll that you are getting is definitely official, and now that seal is representation that it's from him. It's his it's his property, it's his words. You can count on it. This is from the king. And so it is here that God is saying, they're marked. They've got like God's God's inscription on them. And then holy, this word for holy, it means, to be, dedicated, consecrated, a sacred place. You're pretty much saying you belong completely and totally to the Lord. In other places in the Bible, this same word is used to mean separated unto or holy and sacred. And so it's the idea that you belong completely to the Lord. You are saying you're his, and therefore you are no one else's. Like, you belong to him and he belongs to you, and he has put kind of his stamp of approval on you, his stamp of acceptance, if you will. And so let's keep this in mind while we then go to the next slide and review all the other times that we've seen this idea of marking the forehead, and see if we can see this Old Testament list of how God uses this idea of marking the forehead and sometimes the hands. Okay, so I think we have really gotten quite the list here in the Old Testament, as just studying what God uses marking people to represent and what it means when God does it. And so we're just going to review all 12 of these things and then kind of discuss it a little bit and kind of tease it out. In Genesis, we see that God protects even a criminal and shows mercy. In Exodus and Deuteronomy, we see that God uses this idea of marking forehead and hands, and this one is to show love and trust, loyalty, respect, worship of God only, total devotion to God only, remembering that God alone was powerful to defeat their enemies, and a reminder that God was powerful to save them out of slavery, the Israelites. Of course, that was the context there. And then C, we have in Ezekiel, God uses this idea of marking the forehead to protect actually the people who were doing right, the ones that were doing right in the society and in among the people in Jerusalem specifically. And then point D, we see in Exodus 28 this idea of being sealed, almost like a signature of God, belonging to God, being set apart for service to God alone. No other God, just the one true God, and then also being accepted by God. And so it's almost like it's a privilege, a privilege to have this mark on you because it's from God Almighty, and He has put this mark for these different purposes. And it's really a privilege to be able to be marked by the King with kind of like His signet or His signature, His approval, His stamp of approval. It's like I am with Him and He is God. And so it's really just a privilege to be able to do this and to have this. And so I think it may be that the mark of the beast may seem like a privileged position, and the position that the whole world will think is the privileged position, and to reject it would seem ridiculous, so much to the point that they are going to seek out and then kill those who would not accept the idea of being marked, this privileged mark of the King of Kings and the God of heaven, which is what the Antichrist is going to be parading himself as. And so he will be a very um, uh, deceiving uh, imposter of God. And I think that it could be that this will look like quite the privilege and quite the amazing protection and just a great thing to be a part of. And to reject it would seem so ridiculous to the whole world, so much so that they're all okay with you being killed if you will not be a part of it.